The scene was set in Washington, D.C., in one of the most heated political environments in modern American history. The United States had just announced a staggering 145% tariff on Chinese imports, and President Donald Trump had made it crystal clear that the country was now in a full-blown trade war with China. The world was watching as tensions between the U.S. and China soared, and every move in Washington seemed to ripple with ramifications for the global economy. At the heart of the storm was Karoline Leavitt, the newly appointed White House press secretary under President Trump. Karoline had always been known for her sharp mind, unwavering loyalty to the president, and her ability to handle the press with a grace that often left even the toughest reporters speechless. She had quickly become a rising star in the political scene, admired by her supporters and feared by her detractors. One afternoon, the White House press briefing room was packed with journalists from all corners of the country ready to ask questions about the latest developments in the trade war with China. But as soon as Karoline entered the room, something else entirely was on the agenda for the press. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, had decided to make her presence felt in the political discourse as she always did. AOC had been vocal in her criticism of Trump's policies and the growing tension between the U.S. and China, but this time she had a personal jab in mind. As Karoline entered the briefing room, AOC had been quick to take to social media, mocking the press secretary's outfit. AOC tweeted, "I guess when you are selling out America, it's only fitting that you wear a made-in-China dress. Maybe next time Karoline can represent America in a little less hypocrisy." The tweet quickly went viral. AOC's followers, always eager to engage in political drama, shared the tweet and commented, ridiculing Karoline for what they perceived as a glaring contradiction between her pro-America stance and the dress she was wearing. It wasn't just any dress, it was a designer piece, a beautiful, elegant creation that turned heads, but it was indeed made in China. Karoline, however, was not one to back down from a challenge. She walked into the briefing room, her demeanor cool and confident. The room buzzed with anticipation, and the press corps was ready to ask about tariffs, trade negotiations, and, of course, AOC's mocking tweet. Karoline took her seat at the podium, adjusting her mic and staring into the sea of reporters before her. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, her voice steady. "I know you're all eager to discuss the latest developments, so let's get started." But before she could dive into the usual briefing, a reporter from CNN raised their hand, clearly trying to make a point. "Karoline," the reporter began, "I'm sure you're aware of the tweet from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez calling you out for wearing a made-in-China dress. What's your response to her criticism?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on Karoline as she paused for a moment, weighing her words carefully. She knew this would be a defining moment. AOC's jab was not just an attack on her, it was a direct challenge to her position in the White House. A challenge that many of her critics hoped would make her flinch. Karoline smiled. It wasn't a smirk, it was a controlled, deliberate smile that conveyed confidence. She leaned into the mic and responded in her characteristic calm yet firm tone. "Well," she began, "I believe Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's tweet is a perfect example of the kind of partisan theatrics that we see far too often in Washington. It's sad that, instead of engaging in a meaningful conversation about policy and the future of our country, we're having this conversation about something as trivial as the label on my dress." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Karoline had chosen to deflect, not by getting defensive, but by pointing out the pettiness of the attack. She wasn't just standing her ground, she was setting the stage for a much bigger response. "Let's be clear," Karoline continued, "we're in the middle of a trade war with China, and we're making historic moves to hold China accountable for its unfair trade practices. This is not the time for petty distractions or name-calling. We need to focus on protecting American jobs, securing our economy, and standing up to a foreign adversary that has taken advantage of us for far too long." The reporters were intrigued. Karoline was not just handling the situation with grace, she was turning the entire conversation into a larger narrative. The issue at hand was not about a dress or a tweet, it was about the future of the country, about America standing up to China. But AOC wasn't going to let this go that easily. The next day, she took to Twitter again, doubling down on her criticism of Karoline. Maybe a Karoline Leavitt needs to take a closer look at her own wardrobe before talking about tariffs and trade wars. China's influence on American politics is no joke, and neither is the hypocrisy of people like her, AOC tweeted, adding a picture of Karoline wearing the dress. Karoline Leavitt had always prided herself on her composure under pressure. The world had seen her face down countless reporters, political rivals, and even high-stakes situations in the White House press room. But what had started as a single jab from AOC had now escalated into an all-out political battle. And while AOC might have expected Karoline to back down or become flustered, she had another thing coming. The following morning, Karoline's team prepared for yet another press briefing. As she entered the briefing room, the buzz of anticipation was palpable. Reporters were eager for Karoline's response to AOC's latest tweet. They knew she wouldn't just ignore the challenge. Karoline had never been one to shy away from a fight, especially not when it came to defending the president and his policies. But Karoline had decided that this time she wouldn't just respond directly. She would turn the tables entirely. The moment she took the podium, she addressed the room with the same calm but steely confidence that had earned her so much respect. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, glancing briefly at the sea of reporters who waited eagerly for her words. "I know many of you want to ask about the ongoing trade negotiations with China and, of course, the latest tweet from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez." A reporter from Fox News immediately raised her hand, eager to get to the heart of the matter. "Karoline," she began, "AOC tweeted again, doubling down on her criticism of your dress and its Made in China label. What is your response to her claim of hypocrisy, especially considering the tariffs and the trade war with China?" Karoline paused for just a second before responding. This time, she wasn't going to let the focus stay on her attire. "Let's start with the facts," Karoline said, her voice unwavering. "The president's tariffs are aimed at holding China accountable for its unfair trade practices. These tariffs are designed to protect American workers and American industries. As for the dress, well, it's not the most important issue at hand, but if Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez feels the need to make it an issue, let's be clear about the real problem here." The room was silent. Reporters were on the edge of their seats. Karoline's response had already begun to shift the narrative. "The real problem," she continued, "is not about labels or clothing. It's about China's influence on global politics, on our economy, and on American jobs. The tariffs that President Trump has imposed are necessary for our national security and economic future. I will not allow anyone, especially not Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, to distract from that with trivial attacks." A reporter from CNN raised his hand, clearly skeptical. "But Karoline, don't you think it's ironic that you're wearing a dress made in China while supporting policies that are designed to hurt Chinese manufacturing?" Karoline met the reporter's gaze, her eyes steady. "I find it ironic that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, who often touts her commitment to the working class, would focus on my dress instead of addressing the real issues. Why isn't she discussing how China's actions are harming American workers? Why is she choosing to attack me personally rather than engaging in a substantive debate about how we can protect American jobs and hold China accountable?" The reporter was momentarily taken aback, but Karoline wasn't finished. "In fact," she added, "let's be clear about one thing. I wear what I wear because I believe in American sovereignty and the importance of standing up to foreign powers that seek to undermine us. My dress is just a small piece of the bigger picture. The real hypocrisy is in the political elites who continuously engage in political theater while ignoring the everyday struggles of hard-working Americans." Karoline's words were met with a mixture of nods and murmurs of approval from the press. She had managed to turn the entire conversation into a critique of AOC and the political establishment, all while defending her stance on China and the trade war. It was clear that she wasn't just defending herself, she was fighting back with a purpose. The response was swift. Within hours of the briefing, social media was ablaze with reactions to Karoline's comments. Her supporters praised her for her calm, rational approach and for exposing the hypocrisy of those who chose to focus on trivialities instead of substantive issues. AOC's tweet had inadvertently made Karoline into a hero for those who were frustrated with the political bickering in Washington. Karoline's name trended on Twitter as she became the focal point of a larger conversation about the future of American politics, trade, and foreign policy. But AOC, never one to back down, fired back with another tweet. "Karoline thinks defending a made-in-China dress is a distraction? She's the one who is distracting from the real issue. Our economy is in tatters and we're being held hostage by corporations that send jobs overseas. Let's talk about the real problem, trade policies that harm everyday Americans, not her choice of outfit." It was clear that the war of words was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. As the political clash between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez continued to heat up, the narrative began to take on a life of its own. The press was consumed with the back-and-forth exchange, and it quickly became evident that what had started as a personal attack over a made-in-China dress had evolved into a full-scale political battle that captivated the nation. Karoline's calm, measured response in the press briefing had left many of her critics scrambling for a comeback. AOC, known for her quick wit and fiery rhetoric, found herself at a crossroads. She had made her attack, but now the public's focus had shifted. Karoline had expertly framed the debate, turning the attention away from the trivial matter of address and onto more important topics: the future of American trade, the growing tensions with China, and the role of politicians in addressing these issues. But AOC wasn't about to let her rival have the last word. The following day, she delivered a fiery speech on the steps of the Capitol, rallying her supporters around the idea that the trade war with China wasn't just about economics, it was about the values of fairness, equality, and standing up for the American people. She denounced Karoline and the Trump administration for what she described as corporate favoritism and a reckless disregard for the working class. In a passionate address, AOC said this administration, with its tariffs and its trade war, is putting our workers at risk. It's a classic example of politicians who claim to represent the people but who are, in fact, doing the bidding of corporate elites who profit off of cheap labor abroad. And Karoline Leavitt? She stands at the podium defending those policies while wearing a dress made in China. The hypocrisy is staggering, and it's time we call it out for what it is. Her speech was met with cheers from her supporters, who rallied behind her message of resistance to the Trump administration's trade policies. AOC's words had ignited a firestorm of political discourse, and the media had once again turned its attention to the growing feud between her and Karoline. But Karoline wasn't about to let AOC have the final word. As the weeks went by, she continued to rise in popularity among conservatives and moderates alike. Her ability to stay calm and focused in the face of personal attacks had earned her a level of respect from people who appreciated her unwavering loyalty to the president and her dedication to the American worker. The next step in this battle came when Karoline was invited to speak at the National Conservative Forum, a major political event that brought together some of the country's most influential voices on the right. The event was held in a packed auditorium, and Karoline's speech was highly anticipated. The audience was eager to hear her take on the trade war with China, the future of U.S. foreign policy, and, of course, the ongoing feud with AOC. As Karoline took the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. She had become something of a hero to the conservative base, a symbol of strength and resilience in the face of left-wing criticism. With a confident smile, she addressed the crowd. "Thank you for that warm welcome," Karoline began, her voice carrying across the room. "It's an honor to stand here today and talk about the future of our country. A future where we stand up for American workers, American families, and American values. But today, I also want to talk about something else, something that's been dominating the headlines for the past few weeks." She paused, letting the room settle in anticipation. "I'm talking about the ridiculous attacks on me by Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. You know, the same Congresswoman who claims to fight for the working class while promoting policies that would decimate American industries and send more jobs overseas. The same Congresswoman who has no problem calling me out for wearing a dress made in China while she continues to pander to the very interests that have sold out American workers for years." The crowd erupted in applause, and Karoline continued. "I'm here to tell you this: I'm not going to be distracted by petty attacks. I'm not going to be silenced by the political theater that so many in Washington thrive on. I'm here to fight for the American people, and I'm not going to let anyone, especially not AOC, take us off track." Karoline's words were met with cheers and standing ovations. She had deftly reframed the entire narrative, turning the personal attacks into a broader critique of AOC's policies and political ideology. By the end of her speech, it was clear that she had won the crowd over, securing her position as one of the leading voices in the conservative movement. But AOC, ever the political strategist, wasn't ready to concede defeat. She quickly responded on social media, claiming that Karoline's speech was a distraction from the real issues facing America. In a tweet that garnered tens of thousands of likes and retweets, AOC wrote, "Karoline Leavitt and her corporate overlords can keep spinning their lies, but the truth is clear. We need a leader who will fight for the people, not for the billionaires who profit from trade wars." Karoline's rhetoric is just that, rhetoric. The American people deserve more. The back and forth between the two women was becoming more than just a rivalry. It was a battle for the soul of the nation. On one side stood Karoline Leavitt, a fierce defender of President Trump's policies and a champion for American workers. On the other stood Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a passionate advocate for progressive change and a voice for the disenfranchised. And the American public? They were watching closely, waiting to see how this political drama would unfold. As the political battle between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez escalated, the stakes grew higher. Both women were becoming figureheads for their respective political ideologies, Karoline as the staunch defender of American sovereignty, conservative values, and the Trump administration's policies, and AOC as the voice of progressive reform, standing up for the working class and calling out corporate greed. The media, ever hungry for drama, continued to cover the feud obsessively. Every time Karoline posted a statement or made a public appearance, the press scrutinized her every word, looking for any slip-up that AOC could use to her advantage. Similarly, AOC's every tweet and speech was dissected by conservative pundits, who were eager to point out any inconsistencies in her rhetoric. Despite the growing tension, Karoline refused to back down. In fact, she seemed more determined than ever to stand her ground and expose what she saw as AOC's hypocrisy. And she wasn't going to do it just in front of the media, she was going straight to the heart of the political machine. A few weeks after her National Conservative Forum speech, Karoline was invited to appear on one of the most watched political talk shows in the country, the Political Roundtable. Hosted by a former journalist turned political commentator, the show was known for its tough questions and hard-hitting debates. Karoline knew this appearance would be her chance to address the country directly and to finally take the battle to AOC in a setting that would leave no room for evasions or distractions. The night of the interview, Karoline entered the studio with confidence. Her tailored suit and calm demeanor projected the image of a professional who wasn't easily rattled. As she took her seat across from the host, the audience gave her a warm welcome and the cameras began rolling. "Welcome to the Political Roundtable, Karoline," the host said, smiling. "You've certainly become a household name lately. And not just because of your position as White House press secretary, but because of your ongoing feud with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It seems this political rivalry is heating up by the day. Let's start with the obvious question: how do you respond to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's accusations that your policies are damaging to the American working class?" Karoline straightened in her chair, her eyes fixed on the host. "Thank you for having me. Let me be clear, I believe in putting America first, always. And that means standing up to China, standing up for American workers, and ensuring that we have fair trade deals. The trade war with China is a necessary action to protect our economy and our sovereignty." The host nodded, encouraging her to continue. "And what about the attack regarding your dress and the suggestion that you're being hypocritical for supporting tariffs while wearing products made in China?" Meanwhile, AOC had been watching the interview closely from her office. As soon as the segment ended, she fired off another tweet. "Karoline Leavitt wants to talk about China and tariffs, but let's be real, this is about one thing: corporate greed. The president's tariffs won't save American jobs, they'll just hurt the working class. Karoline can talk all day about American sovereignty, but the truth is she's part of a system that's failing the people." It was clear that AOC wasn't going to back down either. And as the political clash between her and Karoline continued to unfold, it became clear that this battle wasn't just about a dress or even about tariffs, it was about two radically different visions for the future of America. As the weeks passed, the clash between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reached its peak. Both women were entrenched in their respective political positions, each determined to prove that their vision for the country was the right one. The media, captivated by the ongoing battle, kept the pressure high, and the American public became more divided by the day. The political atmosphere was charged. The trade war with China was intensifying, and the tariffs were starting to have visible effects on the economy. While Karoline and the Trump administration touted the tariffs as a necessary step to protect American workers and bring China to the negotiating table, critics like AOC argued that the tariffs were hurting the very people they were supposed to help: the middle and lower classes. Then, in a dramatic turn, the White House announced that President Donald Trump would be holding a major press conference to discuss the next steps in the trade war. It was expected to be one of the most significant addresses of his presidency. Karoline, as press secretary, would be leading the briefing, and the entire political world was bracing for what would come next. The day of the press conference arrived, and the anticipation was palpable. Journalists from around the world gathered in the White House press room, eager to hear what the president would say about the escalating tensions with China. Karoline stood at the podium, poised and ready to take the stage. She was calm, collected, and ready to deliver the message that would define the administration's stance on the issue. As Karoline began her remarks, she acknowledged the strain that the trade war was placing on the American economy, but emphasized that the long-term benefits outweighed the short-term costs. The president's decision to implement tariffs was not made lightly, she said. It's been a difficult road, but the president's commitment to putting America first is unwavering. Our country has been taken advantage of for far too long, and we're finally standing up for American workers. The press room was filled with reporters eager to ask questions. Karoline fielded inquiries with her usual composure, deftly deflecting attempts to derail the conversation into partisan attacks. But as expected, the first question came from a journalist with a clear bias. Karoline, some critics, including Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, have argued that your administration's tariffs are hurting the American people. How do you respond to that? Karoline didn't hesitate. I would say that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and others who have criticized the tariffs are missing the bigger picture. This isn't about short-term pain, it's about protecting our industries and ensuring that China plays fair in the global market. The trade imbalance between our two countries has been a long-standing issue, and the president's policies are designed to level the playing field. I believe the American people understand that. The journalist pressed further. But doesn't the fact that you're wearing a dress made in China undercut your message about standing up to China's unfair trade practices? The room fell silent for a moment. Karoline knew the question was coming. It had become the talking point that everyone wanted to revisit. With a calm, almost dismissive smile, she responded, I think it's unfortunate that the focus is still on my attire. The real question should be about how we're addressing the real issues facing American workers. Tariffs, trade imbalances, and holding China accountable, those are the issues that matter. Not my dress. The press room erupted into murmurs, and Karoline's response was met with applause from some corners. She had turned the question around again, refusing to let herself be distracted by the petty attacks that AOC and others had been throwing her way. Instead, she kept her eyes focused on the broader picture. But AOC wasn't done yet. As the press conference wrapped up, she took to social media to launch another salvo. Karoline Leavitt can deflect all she wants, but the truth is clear: this administration's trade war is hurting the American people. Working-class families are paying the price for the president's reckless policies, and Karoline can wear as many dresses made in China as she likes. She'll never be able to hide the fact that her priorities are with the corporations, not the people. AOC's tweet quickly went viral, as it usually did. Her supporters rallied behind her, condemning Karoline's message and painting her as out of touch with the struggles of everyday Americans. The divide between the two women and their respective political ideologies was now a national conversation. But Karoline was unshaken. In the days that followed, she appeared on several conservative talk shows, defending the president's policies and reiterating her belief that the trade war was necessary for the long-term health of the American economy. Each appearance was an opportunity for her to showcase her dedication to the cause, and the more AOC attacked, the more Karoline's resolve seemed to harden. Finally, the political showdown culminated in a televised debate. The event was organized by a major news network, and it promised to be the ultimate face-off between the two women. The debate would cover not only trade policy but also a range of other issues, including healthcare, immigration, and the future of the American economy. The night of the debate, both women arrived on stage, each with a clear sense of purpose. Karoline, in her sharp suit, looked every bit the professional, while AOC, in her trademark style, exuded confidence and energy. The moderators introduced the debate, and the fireworks began. The first question was directed at Karoline. Your administration has been heavily criticized for the way it has handled the trade war with China. How do you respond to those who say that this policy is damaging to American families? Karoline stood tall, her voice steady and unwavering. I understand the concerns of the American people. But let me be clear, this trade war is about securing the future of our country. China has long engaged in unfair practices, and it's time to hold them accountable. The president's tariffs are designed to bring China to the table and ensure that American workers are no longer exploited by foreign countries. AOC quickly interjected, the truth is, Karoline, that these tariffs are costing families their jobs, their savings, and their futures. It's the working-class people who are bearing the brunt of this trade war, not the corporations that you seem so eager to protect. The debate raged on for hours, with both women passionately defending their views. Karoline stuck to her guns, maintaining that the long-term benefits of the tariffs would outweigh the short-term pain, while AOC continued to argue that the policy was a disaster for the American people. In the end, the debate didn't provide a clear resolution. The nation remained divided, with Karoline's supporters praising her calm, methodical approach and AOC's supporters applauding her fiery passion and commitment to progressive change. As the dust settled, one thing was clear: the political clash between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had become a defining moment in American politics, a battle for the future of the country, with both women representing polar opposite visions of what America should be. And though the issue of the made-in-China dress would likely fade into the background, the larger conflict between these two political powerhouses was far from over. The fight for America's future was just beginning, and it was a fight that would continue to shape the political landscape for years to come.